in your opinion, what are the key skills and competencies that leaders need to create a thriving organizational culture?
Again, we can write a book on this, Tom. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the key, so in terms of competencies, I find that um, first and foremost is empathy and really, not just being a genuinely nice person. Like empathy for me is key. Self-awareness is key. Adaptability, some level of adaptability and agility, a willingness to change, is key. And again, with a lot of legacy leaders, we find those are completely lacking. Those are not their strengths at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so just adaptability, I think, if I had to whittle it down to three, I would say empathy, adaptability, and I would say we can call it vulnerability and authenticity, that willingness to be human. Um, Maybe it comes down to accountability. I'm not quite sure what one word we can use to describe that thing of being human, being vulnerable, and owning your shit.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you made a mistake or whether you behaved in an awful way, you didn't know everything, you made a decision without having all the facts, owning that stuff, not blaming anyone else for it. Um, and then another one, and this relates to empathy, I suppose, but self-compassion, because
Mm.
I'm seeing as well, like a lot of leaders are willing to forgive others and they're willing to show kindness and compassion to others, but not to themselves. And the minute they stop being so hard on themselves and they start speaking to themselves like they would a friend or a colleague in a more supportive, forgiving, growth mindset oriented way,
Mm-hmm.
again, you know, the game changes. But if I have to whittle it down, I would say empathy, adaptability, and then this this word that we are yet to find that describes authenticity, vulnerability, and accountability rolled up into one. That
Right.
for me
Yeah.
is the key. Yeah.
It's hard to actually blame people for saying, I choose survival. That's like at the
Yeah.
core of our biology to do that.
But I think that's a whole separate conversation. And I think that's why a lot of organizations misunderstand psychological safety or think that it is that, psychological safety and accountability can't coexist, like they're mutually
Oh,
exclusive somehow,
yeah,
and
no,
they're
no, no.
not. And unfortunately, as you say, there are some mistakes and there are some actions at work that unfortunately are going to get you fired. That you are going to lose your job. um, but
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the exception to the rule. What we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about here, it's we can't change what we don't know. We can't
Mm-hmm.
learn from what we don't know.
And we
um,
can't fix what we're
and
unaware of.
exactly, so if no one's speaking up, we can't action these things. And 99% of the time, speaking up is going to be a teachable moment, and it's going to lead to learning and evolution and continuous improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And very seldom there's going to be you know there's going to be a negative consequence for someone who did speak up, because
Right.
there's got to be that balance as well.
Still, you want to save more lives, you need more people to be able to, even in that situation, be capable of admitting those mistakes, right? And that's pretty high
And a lot of
stakes.
times they're not necessarily mistakes, again, in that environment. And it's fascinating for me working, because I work with the NHS. It's fascinating for me working with medical practitioners, how I think also because of life and death and because so much is on the line, how risk averse many of them have become, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But a lot of times in the course of treatment, it's not a mistake when it's happening. You're acting based on the information that you have
Right.
at the time. And it then turns out you don't know someone is allergic to a specific antibiotic until they have an allergic reaction. So was it a mistake to give them the antibiotic to try and treat the infection and save their life? No, it was not. But
Hmm.
you've now learned that they had an allergic reaction, and hopefully you could do something in time to still save their life.
Right.
And I think that's also where that continuous improvement comes from, and why it's important for people to understand. And again, we can have a whole conversation about the deeply held beliefs around perfection
Hmm.
versus the world that we live in now, where, starting something, taking an iterative approach, imperfect, progress over perfection.
Hmm.
Imperfect first draft is better than unstarted perfect final product, you
Right.
know. So
That's right.
having something imperfect that we can all work on, and I've had this conversation with many people on culture transformation projects. The imperfect first draft of a thing that we can all work on and iterate and improve is better than having nothing.
Right.
And I've had people look at me like I'm insane. I've had it held against me that it's an imperfect first draft. And it's interesting for me just what people's approach is to this, because how do we know that this is not the right thing if we don't try? If we don't at least get it out, and um, it's just absolutely fascinating how risk averse some people are, and what their understanding of consequences, and the stakes might be,
Right.
and
Well, I
how
like
they'll
what.
rather be perfect than make
Mhm.
a mistake.